takes a second or two to connect. It looks like we're connecting now because you can see the messages popping up at the bottom of the screen. That shows you, yes, people are watching. All right, everybody, welcome to the second episode of the Jim Acosta Show here on Substack. A reminder, you can watch this live, of course, you're watching it right now, or you can watch this later. I'll post a recording of this program in just a bit, so you can listen to me in your car. You can do this as you're on the go or whether you're at home. Coming up in just a few moments, as you can see at the bottom of my screen here, my first newsmaker interview of the Jim Acosta Show is Democratic Congressman Joaquin Castro of Texas. He joins me in just a few moments, so stay tuned for that. But the top story, once again, we talked about this yesterday, is what the Musk. The White House confirmed today that by the way, has been making waves in Washington, as you have seen. And he has announced that the U.S. Agency for International Development would be shut down, and aides to Elon Musk gain access to the Treasury Department's federal payment system. The new Treasury Secretary, by the way, Scott Bessent, granted Musk that highly controversial access. That system is responsible for Social Security and Medicare payments, as well as tax returns. And I see many of you are logging on now, sending us your chat thoughts and questions. I should note that one subscriber question that I got in all of this was, will this affect my Social Security checks? I mean, that is something that has been coming across my desk in the last couple of days about all of this. But again, as you can see at the bottom of the screen, Texas Congressman Joaquin Castro, he joins us now. Congressman, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it. And let's just jump right into this. We haven't really ever seen anything like this before. I've been asking the question, what the Musk? So I'll ask you, what the Musk? What's going on here? How could Elon Musk have all of this power and authority?
Well, first, Jim, congratulations on the show and everything you're doing here on Substack.
Thanks.
Your voice is incredibly important, especially right now. Over the last few days, the House of Representatives was out of session last week. And I got at least a few hundred texts, calls, emails, outreach from people in my district in San Antonio that were panicking over the idea of Elon Musk accessing people's personal information, Social Security information at the Treasury. And then we have a good number of federal employees. So furloughing 1,000 employees at USAID, telling them not to show up to work, and then putting a target on the Department of Education, and the idea that Donald Trump, through Elon Musk, would basically issue an order trying to dissolve the Department of Education. So this is unprecedented, I think, in American history, but we'll just say, in any modern American chapter of history, for somebody who is unelected, unappointed, to be able to have this much power, and then also to take, these guys were described as between 19 and 24 years old, these mysterious people that he was taking with him to go records, whether it was the Treasury or USAID. It's all just very strange and very illegal. And Donald Trump seems to be letting him get away with all of it.
Yeah, I mean, he's essentially been given keys to the candy store. And I do want to ask you, Congressman, you mentioned the Department of Education. I do think we should get into that. Earlier today, it was reported, NBC News reporting, that the White House is preparing an executive order to eliminate the Department of Education, according to two sources familiar with the plans. The NBC report notes Trump cannot unilaterally abolish a federal agency without the approval of Congress, so people should understand that. But this goes back to something I think you and I've talked about before, and something that has come up as an issue before. Look it up on page 319. I'm not saying this to you, but others who are watching. Project 2025, as we have discussed on this program yesterday, you and I have talked about this before, says this about the Department of Education. It should be, quote, eliminated. Trump denied he had anything to do with Project 2025 during the presidential campaign. And here we see key elements of Project 2025 being rolled out in these first couple of weeks he's been in power. What do you think, Congressman?
all basically going according to Project 2025. They are taking it basically step by step, and they hate the Department of Education because over the years the Department of Education has been important in making sure that civil rights were respected in American schools, that the history of America in its fullness and fairness was taught, that the history of different groups has been taught over the years, that there's been funding for student loans and grants to students of every background so that they could actually have a chance to graduate from high school and go into college. You remember how hostile Donald Trump was to the idea of student loan forgiveness, for
Right.
example. Well, the Department of Education plays a large part in these programs. And so, but it is important because people have asked, like, how can these people do this? What are y'all going to do? Well, remember, what they're doing is illegal. They can't get rid of a federal department or agency like that because only Congress has the ability to
Right.
establish or dissolve one of these agencies.
Okay. And I did want to ask you about this, Congressman, because this caught my eye. The State Department hiring somebody by the name of Darren Beatty. Who is that? People might be asking. The Washington Post reporting he has been confirmed in a message to readers of the conservative website Revolver, for which he worked, that he would be taking up the post of acting Under Secretary of State for Public Diplomacy. The Washington Post saying it was not clear if he would be formally nominated to take the job, which would require a Senate nomination. But Congressman, you know this. The Post goes on to say that Beatty gained notoriety when he was fired as a White House speechwriter during Donald Trump's first term, after it was revealed he spoke to a conference attended by white nationalists. And he's made numerous inflammatory comments on X. One of those comments was that competent white men must be in charge if you want things to work. So, I mean, how does this guy get in there?
No, it's remarkable. I mean, you have really an avowed racist who they're deciding to put at a very high up position in the State Department. He talked about competent white men being in charge. He's got a Latino boss in Marco Rubio, who's the Secretary of State. Now, the one thing about the acting title is that you can only serve for a certain number of days until you go get confirmed by the Senate. And look, there's no reason that anybody from either party should vote for this guy. He has been pretty outright about his racism and also who he affiliates with. But it really, again, is a sign of the times that Donald Trump would actually appoint him to the State Department.
But Congressman, as you know, I mean, these Trump nominees are getting through. Just today, RFK Jr. Cleared by the Senate Finance Committee. Of course, Senate controlled by Republicans, so these individual committees are controlled by Republicans. Also, Tulsi Gabbard looks like she's getting through at least the Intelligence Committee for Director of National Intelligence. What concerns you about these nominations, these nominees at this point?
Well, it's so ironic because Donald Trump and these guys attacked DEI all throughout the campaign. In fact, he blamed the plane crash in Washington on diversity.
Right.
He has nominated the most unqualified cabinet, probably in American history. A lot of these people are way out of their depth of experience or knowledge or expertise. And so, so you wonder, well, how did these people get confirmed? Well, the members of the Senate, especially the Republicans, because they have a majority over there, they got threatened with primary challenges with people who have said, including Elon Musk, that he will spend millions of dollars in Republican Party primaries unless these people vote to confirm somebody like RFK Jr. And the Defense Secretary and all of these other folks who are really unqualified for their jobs.
Yeah, I mean, does it concern you? You sit on the House Intelligence Committee to have somebody like Tulsi Gabbard as the Director of National Intelligence. She has repeatedly uh, reiterated Russian talking points when it comes to Ukraine. She has repeatedly reiterated talking points from the fallen Assad regime of Syria. Can she be trusted with the nation's intelligence?
It's absolutely concerning. Tulsi and I came in the same year to the House of
Mm.
Representatives. She represented part of Hawaii, and we both came in 2013. And over time, she seemed to get further out there in her positions, including seeming to apologize for Syria, for Assad, for Russia, and for a lot of grotesque things. And so it does concern me
Yeah.
that she may take on this role now.
And the last thing I want to ask you about, Congressman, and thank you so much for your time. Today, I should note, the White House did confirm that these flights to Guantanamo of undocumented migrants have begun. The Hill reporting the Trump administration has begun those transporting flights. As you know, Congressman, that base served as a detention facility for terrorists after the 9/11 attacks. And apparently, there are still some terrorists detained there. I assume that the people there are going to be separating, keeping the migrants away from the terrorists that are still being held there. But one of the questions that was asked of Kristi Noem, the Homeland Security Secretary, on Meet the Press on Sunday was whether women and children would be held at GITMO. Uh, she did not answer that question, apparently. What do you think of that? I mean, and the idea of keeping migrants at Guantanamo.
Immigrants and migrants have been the number one scapegoat for Donald Trump and the Republican Party since Donald Trump came down that escalator in 2015. And they have done everything they can to dehumanize these people, to make the American public believe that each and every one of them is a potential serial killer or threat to Americans. And so this is one more step towards that inhumanity of putting them away from the mainland United States in a dark place where nobody can figure out what's going on over there, and putting them with known terrorists also. I mean, think about that. These are folks, just like the parents of some people who are in Congress or in the Senate who came to the United States seeking a better life. And now the president of the United States is talking about putting those people in cells next to terrorists. I don't think that it's legal. I don't know how he can constitutionally hold people there indefinitely, as he's talked about. And so I'm sure that it'll be litigated. And I think that it would be an ugly and dark chapter in American history if this is allowed to happen.
And I do want to let you go, but I do have one follow-up question, because I think folks have been chiming in with this, and it's been on my mind too. And I'm sure you've heard this as well, is what can Democrats really do in this moment if Republicans control the White House and you have Trump's MAGA acolytes essentially in charge in both the House and the Senate? The question would be, what do Democrats do right now?
Yeah, I mean, we have gotten pressed like, do something. What are y'all
Yeah.
doing? And so, very quickly, here's what it is. Well, first of all, these are executive orders. So they're not pieces of legislation that he's trying to run through Congress for the most part. So we're supporting the litigation that is being put out there, that's being filed to block these executive orders. One of them has been successful already in blocking the federal funding freeze, for example. We also are trying to get the word out to the American people, because it can't just be politicians speaking up. You need a wide range of Americans of all political parties and all backgrounds who are speaking up against these unprecedented actions by a president who is starting to act like a dictator. And then finally, within the legislative process, there's going to be an appropriations process where Congress controls the power of the purse. Congress gets to decide whether we appropriate money for things like sending migrants to Guantanamo Bay, and further militarizing the border and things like that. And so that's where we will have leverage as well. But I think people need to get loud. They need to express their opinions to all their elected officials and the president as well.
All right, Congressman Joaquin Castro, Democrat of Texas. Thank you very much for your time. Thanks for being the very first newsmaker on this program. We appreciate it. I stole a couple of extra minutes from your time, but thanks for that. Thanks for your time.
Good to be with
All right, good to be with you as well. All right, that was Congressman Joaquin Castro of Texas joining us live. And of course, as I was saying at the top of this program, you can not only watch this live after this is over, I'll save a recording. It'll go on the podcast site, and you'll be able to watch it at your convenience. I've already heard from people who are saying they take it and listen to it later in their car, on the drive home from work, and so on. And so I do think the congressman there had some very interesting points there at the very end. And please understand, as we're having these conversations, and while I'm talking to you on this program, I can see some of the chat messages at the bottom here. And I think one of the recurring messages that I've been seeing over and over again is, and this is just coming from people who I think care an awful lot about what's happening in this country right now. They're asking the question, what are Democrats doing about this? What can they do about this? You are starting to see some Democrats up on Capitol Hill hold press conferences. You saw a number of lawmakers outside of USAID. Yesterday, my understanding is that this evening, outside the Treasury Department, there's going to be another protest. Obviously, people are concerned about Elon Musk and his aides having access to the federal payment system over at the Treasury Department. I mean, that is something that we haven't even contemplated at this point. The world's richest man, somebody who controls a website like X, which has essentially become a propaganda website for Donald Trump, having access to this payment system with everybody's Social Security information, presumably, everybody's Medicare information, presumably, tax refund information, presumably. Um, is that what Elon Musk was spending hundreds of millions of dollars on during the campaign, to have access to our federal government? As I asked yesterday on this program, who elected Elon Musk? He's not been appointed to a cabinet position. Uh, he's not going through the nomination process. As the White House was saying earlier today, they're describing him as, I'll just find this again, a special government employee. He's been given special government employee status, whatever that means. As a lot of folks are saying, not so special, but there were a number of Democratic senators up on Capitol Hill yesterday holding a press conference about this. Senator Patty Murray of Washington State saying that Democrats are pulling the fire alarm over Elon Musk and his recent action. Sounds like a five-alarm fire to me. So we'll see where things go from here. But as I was talking about with the congressman a few moments ago, Democrats are in the minority in the Senate. Democrats are in the minority in the House. They can't really hold hearings on some of these actions. And so, as the congressman was indicating a few moments ago, what what some of these Democrats are going to have to do, what governors in various states are going to have to do, is take the administration to court and see if the judicial system, one of the checks and balances, hello, we still have checks and balances in this country, decides it can take on one of these cases. Now, one of the other things I do want to talk about is this notion in Washington. I didn't get a chance to talk about this with Congressman Castro. This notion of investigate the investigators. This is something you have heard Donald Trump talk about. This is something you have heard Trump allies talking about out on the airwaves on places like Fox News and so on. And Politico reporting today that FBI agents who worked on the investigation into January 6th and on the probes into allegations of criminal misconduct by Donald Trump the agents have filed a class action lawsuit to stop the Trump Justice Department, the leadership team there, from putting together lists of agents, the agents who worked on those cases. This, of course, stems, as I said a few moments ago, from those vows from Trump and his allies that they will, quote, investigate the investigators. Now, if there are top officials inside the Justice Department who are asking for lists of agents, then of course, 8 lists of agents who have been working on these cases, then of course, that is the beginning of investigate the investigators. Now, according to Politico, the agents who brought the federal suit anonymously included screenshots of a 3-page survey they say DOJ leadership intends to use to identify thousands of agents who worked on the politically sensitive cases. This is, again, according to Politico. According to the lawsuit, the agents are fearful that the Trump-led Justice Department will disseminate the lists publicly or use them to exact punishment against employees deemed disloyal. Now, again, and I've talked about this before, January 6th was an attack on our country. January 6th was an attack on our democracy. It was an attack on the chapel of our democracy, the US Capitol. How do you not investigate the attack on January 6th? And so these FBI agents were just doing their jobs. And, to me, it boggles the mind how anybody inside the Trump administration with a straight face can say, oh, well, we're going to try to root out these FBI agents who are just doing their jobs, investigating one of the biggest criminal cases, if not the biggest criminal case in American history, and that is the investigation into January 6th. So I think that one's on my mind as well. We're going to be talking about that in the coming days. I've some other guests lined up for later this week. We'll be talking about that subject. But again, a lot of stuff happening this week, and one of the things that Democrats have found themselves in the middle of right now is sort of a moment of impotence. Sadly, I hate to put it that way, and because they just don't have the votes to really do anything from a legislative standpoint up on Capitol Hill, and so they're going to have to get creative. They're going to have to do something other than just roll over. And I'm not saying that they are, but I think there are a lot of concerns among Democrats that Democrats just need to get going here. That Democratic elected officials need to get going and make sure that they're holding Trump's feet to the fire. I'm going to be doing that here on this program. A lot of the guests I'll be having on this program will be doing that as well. But the other thing that's on my mind while I have everybody here, and it's something I think everybody can relate to, is pandemic readiness. Remember what was going on in 2020, 2021, when we were all sitting at home, binge watching a lot of TV shows, but also really freaked out about whether or not we were going to catch this deadly virus. And of course, we could go down the laundry list of things that Donald Trump did when he was president the first time around to make that pandemic all the more frightening for the American people. But this is a moment that I think we have to think very deeply about, very critically about, and that is the fact that RFK Jr., Robert F. Kennedy Jr., appears to be on his way to becoming the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services. Now, that sounds like a headline out of the Twilight Zone, but it's reality. It's where we are right now. And earlier today, as I was talking about with Congressman Castro, RFK Jr. cleared a critical vote before the Senate Finance Committee. Republican Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, who was reportedly torn over whether to vote for RFK Jr., ended up giving Kennedy the green light in a committee vote. That clears the way for a vote before the full Senate. Barring some surprises, the anti-vaccine activist is expected to be approved. Now, Kennedy has denied that he is anti-vaccines. I'll mention that here. He says that. I'll say that. Fine. But what does the evidence say? He has repeatedly peddled bogus and sometimes even racist claims about vaccines. And a key question for the lawmakers up on Capitol Hill who are voting for RFK Jr. is what happens if RFK Jr. is confirmed as HHS secretary and there is another pandemic or public health crisis in this country? RFK Jr. is going to be in charge of another vaccine rollout. RFK Jr. is going to be in charge of telling the public what they need to know if some virus starts spreading around. What happens if bird flu becomes more of a concern than it already is? RFK Jr. is going to be trusted to go out there in front of the cameras and talk about this? Give me a break. Give me a break about RFK Jr. I mean, I think the question to members of Congress on the Republican side, because Democrats by and large are voting against these nominees. When I was watching the vote at the Senate Finance Committee hearing earlier today, Democrats voted against RFK Jr., Republicans voted for him. But the question to Republican lawmakers is this, and I think to Senator Cassidy, before this final vote in the Senate, on the floor of the Senate, where do you stand on this? And I think the question is, will you take responsibility for voting for this man if he botches the response and people are hurt? If people are hurt as a result of another pandemic, public health crisis that happens in this country, and RFK Jr. is out there spreading conspiracy theories, spreading misinformation, will you take responsibility, Senator Cassidy, Senator Collins, um, Senator McConnell, and the rest? And I think, yes, Tulsi Gabbard, that's a vitally important role. And we can have this discussion on another occasion. I'm glad we had Congressman Castro on, who was on the Intelligence Committee. He's a key person to talk to about this. But what is something that affects all of us? What is something that affects our parents? What is something that affects our kids, our loved ones, their health, their health. That is what ties us all together and all that's the common denominator for all of us. And you're telling me that if there's a public health crisis, that RFK Jr. is going to roll out in front of the cameras and tell us how to protect ourselves? I mean, I just think that I think that that's a key question, and I don't think it's an outrageous question to ask. By the way, and you might say, oh well, you know, gosh, you're giving RFK Jr. a hard time. His own cousin, Caroline Kennedy, the daughter of JFK, came out and said he has no business being the Secretary of the Health and Human Services Department. And think about where we came from and where we are now. I just saw the name Dr. Fauci flash across the screen in one of the chats. Dr. Anthony Fauci, a renowned public health expert, respected around the world, and up until the Trump administration, the first time around, respected within the government of the United States. He served Republican presidents, Democratic presidents. When during the pandemic, when Dr. Fauci went out and spoke in front of the cameras, I was there in the White House briefing room. I was asking questions of Dr. Fauci and so on. Nobody at that time, of course, you didn't have any question whatsoever about what Dr. Fauci said, what Dr. Fauci recommended. And now, of course, what we're seeing is Dr. Fauci is having a security detail pulled. He is being subjected to intimidation once again. I talked to him once again on Inauguration Day. I spoke to him very briefly over the phone because he had been issued a pardon by Joe Biden. Think about that. Think about that. The kind of world that we're in right now. When Dr. Anthony Fauci, who, by the way, helped develop the COVID vaccine during the first Trump administration, needs some kind of a pardon from Joe Biden in the 11th hour on his way out of office uh, because of what? Because of the threats and intimidation that are coming his way. And when I talked to Dr. Fauci about this, he was pleased that Biden had given him this pardon. But my God, that shouldn't be necessary in the first place. What kind of world are we living in when that kind of thing has to happen to protect somebody like Dr. Fauci? It's just unbelievable. A preemptive pardon had to be done there. It's just a crying shame, and it just tells you where we are as a country right now. And I think it highlights something that we were talking about at the top of this program, as I like to say, what the Musk. Um, one of the things that we're going to see in Washington this evening, and I'm about to go down there to go check it out, is there's going to be a protest apparently outside the Treasury Department, and people are going to be making their voices heard about how Elon Musk and his acolytes, and we don't even know who these people are. Do they have security clearances? What's going on here? Going into the Treasury Department, having access to the federal payment system, uh, apparently having some sort of sway over USAID, which, by the way, funds a lot of the White House has been talking about this program, that program. And they're like, okay, you can pick apart those things, fine. We'll give you that. But of course, they also serve a very necessary function around the world. And you have seasoned diplomats who work on behalf of the American people in all of these far flung places around the world. They don't know what's happening with them. Their jobs are up in the air. And so I think a lot of folks are asking some very hard questions. And I will say, one of the things that's gratified me about doing this show, and we're just a couple of days in, this is episode 2, is what you have done for me, the viewer at home, the people who are watching this on their phone. If you're going to record this and look at the recording later, I'm looking at the questions that are coming across in my chats. I wish I could share them all. I shared some the other day in one of my posts on Substack. But what your posts have told me is that you are still very much engaged in what is taking place right now. You're paying attention. You are, you care. You care about what's happening in this country. And you may feel as though you've been shut out of the process. You may feel as though you're on the outside looking in with your nose pressed up against the glass. But I can tell you, having covered politics in this town for a couple of decades, covering two different presidential administrations, covering the politicians up on Capitol Hill, they listen to you. They listen to you, the American people. Forgive me for pointing at the screen here. And so it is necessary for the public to make their voices heard. Um, that's our patriotic duty as Americans. I'm doing it here. You're doing it by paying attention and watching this and posting your comments. You can't be passive about this. You can't just sit on the sofa and shake your head and say, you know what, darn it, we lost that election. Democrats might say, oh, we lost this election. I can't do anything about it. And by the way, Republicans, disaffected Republicans who did not vote for Donald Trump feel the exact same way. Feel the exact same way. Centrists, unaffiliated people, independent people. I've never been registered with the party in my entire life. I've always been a registered independent. A lot of people across the political spectrum. You could be very conservative. Somebody as conservative as Judge Michael Luddick. You can be as conservative as Judge Michael Luddick and be terrified about what's happening right now. So it's not just a Democrat thing, not just a progressive thing. Independents, Republicans, conservatives, people who care about this country, all concerned, all worried. But at the same time, I get the sense that people are starting to steel themselves for action. To tell Donald Trump, listen, you can't just hand the keys to the candy store, the keys to the castle to Elon Musk. Doesn't Elon Musk have enough castles? Doesn't Elon Musk have enough? He's got rocket ships. He's got X. One of the things that people ought to keep in mind about Elon Musk is he blows up a lot of rockets. A lot of the rockets that he sends up into the sky, they don't have that perfect, majestic landing. I'll give him credit for that. Super cool thing when SpaceX does that. They make the perfect landing there. But he blows up a lot of rockets in the process. Our government, of the people, by the people, for the people, is not some rocket test, some science project for Elon Musk. It belongs to all of us. Who told him? Who gave him permission? Who said, yeah, go ahead over to the Treasury Department and start demanding access to the federal payment system? Donald Trump did. The president did. Ultimately, he's responsible. As I was saying yesterday on the program, he is the master of passing the buck. Harry Truman used to say the buck stops here. Donald Trump says the buck stops somewhere else, anywhere else but right here. And that's just not how it works. That's why he lost the first time around. Couldn't manage the COVID pandemic. People got tired of him posting all kinds of wacky stuff day and night. They threw him out. They got tired of the lies. They got tired of the disinformation, tired of the BS. The BS is back. It's back. It's back with a vengeance. So in the meantime, you get a little frustrated, just say, what the Musk? But don't stop caring. Don't stop caring about this country. Don't stop caring about what you can do for this country. And I'll keep caring too, and I'll keep asking the questions here. And like, what the Musk? We'll keep asking that question. But in the meantime, that's it for this episode of the Jim Acosta Show. Again, as I was saying earlier, you can watch this on Substack later on. Just take a look at the recording. I'll put it on my podcast site there. Again, special thanks to Congressman Joaquin Castro of Texas. We're going to have a lot more in store as the days go on, so stay tuned as those days go on. But in the meantime, still reporting from Washington, I'm Jim Acosta. Have a good night.